I had just finished rebuilding a 2008 Polaris IQ when Patricia Hendricks from the HOA board came storming across my driveway, her face already turning that particular shade of crimson that meant I was about to have a very long afternoon. It was 3 o'clock on a Tuesday in February, and the Colorado winter had been brutal enough that my little snow machine repair shop in the garage of my Lakewood subdivision home had been absolutely slammed with work for the past 2 months. "Kyle Anderson, you need to shut this operation down immediately," Patricia announced, not even bothering with a greeting. She was clutching a leather-bound copy of our HOA bylaws like it was the Holy Bible itself. I straightened up from the snowmobile, wiping grease from my hands with a shop rag. "Good afternoon to you too, Patricia. What seems to be the problem? The problem? The problem?" Her voice hit that screech that made my neighbor's dog start barking 3 houses down. "You are running a commercial business out of a residential property in clear violation of Section 12, Paragraph 4 of our community guidelines. Not to mention the noise, the traffic, the eyesore of having these machines parked in your driveway." I glanced at my driveway. There were currently 4 snowmobiles in various states of repair, all neatly arranged and covered with tarps when I wasn't actively working on them. My property looked a hell of a lot better than the Simmons place 2 doors down with their rusted basketball hoop and scattered children's toys, but Patricia had never seemed to care about that. "Patricia, I work out of my garage. I'm not operating a storefront. People drop off their machines, I fix them, they pick them up. That's hardly a commercial operation. You advertise on the internet. You have a business license. You collect payment for services. That is the very definition of a commercial operation." She thrust the bylaw book at me, her French manicured nail stabbing at a highlighted section. "No home-based businesses that generate traffic or create noise disturbances. It says it right here." I had been doing this work for 3 years without a single complaint. I'd even fixed Patricia's husband's snow blower last winter, and he'd been perfectly happy with my service. But Patricia had recently been elected HOA president, and apparently the tiny amount of power had gone straight to her head like cheap vodka. "Look, I'm just trying to make a living here. I lost my job at the dealership when they downsized, and this is how I'm keeping my mortgage paid. I'm not bothering anyone." "You're bothering me," Patricia snapped. "And as HOA president, I represent this entire community. You have until the end of the week to cease operations, or I'll be forced to take further action." "What kind of action?" I asked, though I probably shouldn't have. "Legal action, fines, a lien against your property if necessary. Don't test me, Kyle. I've already consulted with our HOA attorney." She turned on her expensive heel and marched back toward her perfectly manicured lawn across the street. I watched her go, feeling that familiar knot of frustration tightening in my chest. This was exactly the kind of petty neighborhood politics that made people hate HOAs with a burning passion. My next-door neighbor, Frank Martinez, came out onto his porch with a beer in hand. He'd clearly been watching the whole exchange through his window. "She's going to make your life hell, you know," Frank called over. "Yeah, I'm getting that impression." My cousin had an HOA dispute in his neighborhood in Aurora. Cost him 15 grand in legal fees before it was all settled. These people don't play around. That was exactly what I was afraid of. I didn't have 15 grand. I barely had 1,500 in savings after the rough December I'd had with medical bills for my daughter's emergency room visit. My ex-wife had been on my case about child support being late. My truck needed new tires. And now this. I went back into the garage and tried to focus on the Polaris in front of me. The owner, a guy named Derek who worked as a ski instructor in Breckenridge, Needed it back by the weekend for a guided backcountry tour he was leading. The clutch had been slipping and I'd traced it to a worn belt and some debris in the housing. Simple fix, but it required attention to detail. My phone rang around 5. It was my buddy Marcus, who worked for the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. "Hey man, you doing anything Friday night? Thought we could grab some wings, catch the game." "Depends on whether I'm still allowed to exist in my own home by then," I said, and then filled him in on Patricia's visit. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, we get calls about HOA disputes all the time. Usually just civil stuff, but sometimes it gets nasty. Had a situation last year where an HOA president tried to have a guy arrested for refusing to repaint his mailbox the approved color." "Did you arrest him?" "Hell no. We told the HOA president that it was a civil matter and to stop wasting our time. But some of these folks, they think they're running their own little kingdom." "That's Patricia exactly. She's got that whole power trip thing going on. Just watch yourself. Keep everything documented. Pictures, dates, times. If she starts making threats or doing anything that could be considered harassment, let me know." After we hung up, I thought about Marcus's advice. Documentation. I started a new folder on my phone and took pictures of my clean, organized workspace, the neatly arranged snowmobiles, the lack of any actual disturbance to the neighborhood. If this was going to turn into a fight, I wanted to be prepared. The rest of the week passed without incident, which should have been my first warning that something was brewing. Patricia wasn't the type to make threats and then just let things go. I finished Derek's Polaris on Thursday, started working on a Ski-Doo that needed a full engine rebuild, and tried to keep my head down. Friday afternoon, I was in the garage testing the Ski-Doo's newly rebuilt engine when a Jefferson County Sheriff's cruiser pulled up in front of my house. For a second, I thought it might be Marcus stopping by, but the officer who got out was someone I didn't recognize. Young guy, probably mid-20s, with the kind of alert posture that suggested he was fairly new to the job. I shut off the engine and walked out to meet him, my stomach already sinking. Patricia had actually called the cops on me. "Afternoon, officer. Something I can help you with." He looked at his notepad. "Are you Kyle Anderson?" "That's me." I received a call about a noise complaint and illegal commercial activity at this address. "You want to tell me what you've got going on here?" I took a deep breath and launched into my explanation. I was a certified mechanic, had been for 12 years. I did small engine repair, specializing in snowmobiles. I had all the proper business licenses, paid my taxes, carried liability insurance. I worked out of my garage during reasonable hours, never after 8 at night or before 9 in the morning. I didn't have customers hanging around or loitering. It was quiet, professional, and legal. The officer, whose name tag read Morrison, listened patiently, and then asked if he could take a look at the setup. I walked him through the garage, showing him the organized tool benches, the parts inventory, the work area. Everything was clean and professional. "How loud does it get when you're testing the machines?" Morrison asked. "I only run them for a few minutes at a time to make sure the repairs worked, maybe 10, 15 minutes total out of an entire day." "And the woman who called, she's HOA?" "Patricia Hendricks. She's the HOA president. Decided 3 days ago that my business is suddenly a problem, even though I've been doing this for 3 years without any complaints." Morrison nodded slowly, looking around. Then his eyes landed on a 2012 Arctic Cat Pro Climb that I just finished restoring. It was a beautiful machine, painted in a custom blue and silver scheme that I'd done myself. I'd bought it as a salvage title project 3 months ago and had just finished getting it back to perfect condition. "That one's gorgeous," Morrison said. You do the paint work yourself? Yeah, all of it. Rebuilt the engine, new suspension, upgraded the track. It's basically brand new now. You selling it? I hadn't really planned on it. The Arctic Cat had been more of a passion project, something to work on during the slow hours. But I also wasn't in a position to turn down money, especially with the HOA situation potentially turning expensive. I could be convinced, I said. I've got about 8 grand into it in parts and labor. Morrison walked around the machine, checking it over with the practiced eye of someone who actually knew snowmobiles. You take it out yet? Just up to Golden Gate Canyon for a test run last weekend. Runs like a dream. Gets up to about 110 on the straight sections, handles like it's on rails. I've been looking for something exactly like this. My old Polaris died last season and I've been trying to find a good deal on a replacement. He looked at me. You take $7,500, cash. I'd need to hit an ATM, but yeah. I thought about it for about 2 seconds. $7,500 would cover my mortgage payment, the late child support, and leave enough for some breathing room while I figured out the HOA situation. You've got a deal. Morrison's face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. Seriously? Man, I've been looking for months. Everything on Craigslist is either trashed or way overpriced. Let me get the title. It's already in my name, so we can do the transfer right now if you want. We spent the next 20 minutes handling the paperwork. Morrison called his wife to let her know about the purchase, and from what I could hear of her side of the conversation, she was used to him making impulse buys when it came to outdoor equipment. He said he'd be back in a couple of hours with the cash and a trailer to haul it away. Before he left, Morrison put his notepad away and looked at me seriously. About the complaint, from what I can see, you're not violating any county ordinances. The noise isn't excessive, you're not blocking the street, you've got proper licensing. This is a civil matter between you and your HOA. I'm going to document that I responded to the call and found no violations. If she calls again, we'll tell her the same thing. I appreciate that. And hey, if the HOA gives you too much trouble, you might want to look into the state laws about home-based businesses. Colorado's pretty friendly to them, and HOAs can't override state law. After Morrison left, I went back into the garage feeling significantly better than I had all week. I just made $7,500 and had a police officer document that I wasn't doing anything illegal. That had to count for something. I was wrong about that last part, as it turned out. Patricia showed up at my door at 7:30 that evening, just as Morrison was loading the Arctic Cat onto his trailer. She stood on my porch with her arms crossed, watching the transaction with narrowed eyes. "I see you're still conducting business," she said when I opened the door. "I'm selling my personal property. That's not a business transaction. You expect me to believe that police officer just happened to buy a snowmobile from you? Believe whatever you want, Patricia. Officer Morrison responded to your complaint, found that I'm not violating any laws, and then noticed I had a machine he was interested in. It's called networking." Her eyes went flat and cold. "You think you're very clever, don't you, getting the police on your side?" "I'm not getting anyone on any side. I'm just trying to make a living and stay within the law. Maybe you should try the same thing." That was probably a mistake. You don't poke angry HOA presidents and expect them to just let it go. But I was tired, I was stressed, and I was sick of being treated like a criminal for fixing snowmobiles in my own garage. "You'll be hearing from our attorney," Patricia said, "and from the county code enforcement. We'll see how clever you feel when you're buried in legal fees and fines." She left before I could respond, and I watched her walk back to her house with a growing sense of unease. Patricia was the kind of person who made threats and followed through on them. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, Morrison came over after he'd secured the Arctic cat on his trailer. "She seems pleasant. She's a real peach." That was the HOA president. "Yeah, I figured. Look, I meant what I said earlier. You're not doing anything illegal, but these HOA disputes can get ugly fast. My wife's sister went through something similar in Arvada, and it dragged on for 2 years." "That's encouraging. Just saying, be prepared for it to get worse before it gets better. People like her don't like being told no." Morrison left with his new snowmobile, and I went back inside to an empty house that suddenly felt very quiet. My daughter was with her mother this week, and I found myself missing the noise and chaos she brought with her. At least when Emma was around, I had something to focus on besides HOA politics and money problems. I spent Saturday morning cleaning the garage and organizing my workspace even more meticulously than usual. If code enforcement was going to show up, I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect. No oil stains on the floor, no parts scattered around, nothing that could be construed as a violation of any code. Around 11, Frank came over with a 6-pack and his own story about his cousin's HOA nightmare. "They went after him for painting his house the wrong shade of beige," Frank said, handing me a beer. "Spent 18 months in legal battles before the judge finally told the HOA they were being ridiculous. But by then, my cousin had spent 20 grand in legal fees and was so stressed out he developed an ulcer." "You're really cheering me up here, Frank. Just preparing you for what might be coming. Patricia's got a reputation. She's been president for 4 months, and she's already driven 3 families in the neighborhood to sell and move. The Johnsons, the Lees, and those newlyweds who lived in the corner house. How did she drive them out? Constant harassment, fines for tiny infractions, threatening letters, making their lives miserable until they couldn't take it anymore. It's like a hobby for her. Doesn't anyone fight back? Most people don't have the time, money, or energy. It's easier to just move than to fight an HOA president with nothing better to do than make your life hell." We sat in my driveway drinking beer and watching the neighborhood go about its Saturday routine. Kids playing in yards, people washing cars, the normal suburban weekend activities. It all looked so peaceful and normal, and yet there was this undercurrent of tension now that I couldn't shake. My phone rang that afternoon. Unknown number which I normally didn't answer, but given everything that was happening, I figured I should. "Is this Kyle Anderson?" A man's voice, professional and clipped, speaking. "This is Richard Thornton. I'm the attorney representing the Cascade Hills Homeowners Association. I'm calling to inform you that the association has filed a formal complaint regarding your unlicensed commercial operation. I have a business license from the city of Lakewood. Your license allows for a home occupation, which under HOA bylaws is strictly prohibited. You have 30 days to cease operations, remove all commercial equipment from the property, and pay a fine of $500 for violation of community standards. And if I don't, the fine will increase by $500 per week until compliance is achieved. Additionally, the HOA will place a lien on your property and pursue legal action to recover costs." I felt my jaw clenching. "I'll need to see the specific bylaw you're citing." "It will be included in the formal letter we're sending via certified mail. You should receive it within 3 business days. Good day, Mr. Anderson." He hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, feeling like I'd just been punched in the stomach. $500. Plus 500 more per week if I didn't comply. I didn't have that kind of money, and shutting down my business would mean I definitely wouldn't have it in the future. I called Marcus and told him what had just happened. "They can't just make up fines like that," Marcus said. "Well, they can, but you can fight them. Have you read your HOA agreement? Not in detail. I bought the house 4 years ago and there wasn't much HOA activity back then. The previous president was this retired guy who basically did nothing, which was fine with everyone. You need to rate it. Every word. Look for anything that might support your position, and you should probably get your own attorney. I can't afford an attorney, Marcus. I'm barely keeping my head above water as it is. Colorado has some legal aid services, and there are attorneys who specialize in HOA disputes. Some of them will take cases on contingency if they think they can win. After hanging up with Marcus, I spent the rest of the afternoon reading through the HOA bylaws and my purchase agreement. It was dense, boring legal language, but I forced myself through every page. What I found was both encouraging and frustrating. The bylaws did prohibit commercial businesses, but the definition was vague. It mentioned businesses that created significant traffic, noise, or disturbance to the peaceful enjoyment of the community. That was subjective as hell. What was significant? Who got to decide? There was also a section about home occupations being allowed as long as they didn't violate county codes and didn't create a disturbance. So which was it? Were home occupations prohibited or allowed? The more I read, the more I realized that the bylaws were a mess of contradictions and vague language that could be interpreted almost any way someone wanted. That might work in my favor, or it might just mean an expensive legal fight where neither side had a clear advantage. Monday morning, I had to drop off Emma at school and then head to the bank to deposit Morrison's cash. On the way back, I swung by a print shop and made copies of all my documentation. Business license, insurance certificate, every receipt for parts and equipment, photographs of the workspace. I organized everything into a binder and felt like I was preparing for war, because that's what this was turning into. A war over whether I had the right to make a living in my own home. The certified letter arrived Tuesday, just as the attorney had promised. It was 3 pages of legal language that basically said what Thornton had told me on the phone, plus a bunch of threats about legal action and property liens. The specific bylaw they cited was Section 12, Paragraph 4, which stated, "No commercial, business, or professional activity shall be conducted on any lot or in any residence that generates pedestrian or vehicular traffic, creates noise or disturbance, or otherwise diminishes the residential character of the community." I photographed the letter and sent it to Marcus, along with a text asking if he knew any good attorneys. He sent back the name of a lawyer in Denver named Gregory Kowalski, who specialized in HOA disputes. I called Kowalski's office and explained my situation to his assistant. She scheduled a consultation for Thursday afternoon and mentioned that the initial meeting was free. That was something, at least. Wednesday was quiet, which made me nervous. I worked on the ski-doo rebuild and tried not to think about everything else. A customer called to schedule a repair for the following week, and I had to make the awkward decision about whether to take the job. If I refused work, I'd lose income. If I took it, I'd potentially be racking up more HOA fines. I took the job. I wasn't going to let Patricia Hendricks dictate whether I could feed my family. That evening, I was closing up the garage when a silver Mercedes pulled into my driveway. A woman I'd never seen before got out, dressed in an expensive business suit and carrying a tablet. Kyle Anderson. That's me. I'm Jennifer Walsh, Jefferson County Code Enforcement. I'm here to investigate a complaint about unpermitted business activity. Here we go, I thought. Patricia was throwing everything she could at me. "Come on in," I said, leading her into the garage. "I've got all my documentation ready if you'd like to see it." I walked Jennifer through everything. Business license, zoning verification, insurance, tax returns showing I'd been reporting income properly. She took notes on her tablet and asked questions about the type of work I did, how many customers I saw per week, what hours I operated. "How many vehicles do you typically have on the property at once?" she asked. "Right now, 4. Usually it's between 3 and 6. And they're all parked where? Driveway or garage? Never on the street. Signage? None. Customers find me through word of mouth or online." Jennifer spent another 20 minutes inspecting everything and taking photos. Finally, she closed her tablet and looked at me. "Mr. Anderson, from what I can see, you're in compliance with county regulations for a home-based business. Your license is current, you're not violating any noise ordinances, and you're not creating a public nuisance. However, your HOA agreement is a separate matter. If they believe you're violating community bylaws, that's a civil dispute that you'll need to resolve through your HOA procedures or through the courts. So I'm not doing anything illegal. Not from a county perspective, no. But that doesn't mean your HOA can't enforce their own rules. Those are private contracts between you and the association." After Jennifer left, I felt a strange mix of relief and frustration. Relief that I wasn't violating any actual laws, frustration that the HOA could still make my life miserable despite that fact. My consultation with Gregory Kowalski on Thursday was both enlightening and depressing. Kowalski was in his 50s, with the tired eyes of someone who'd been fighting HOA battles for decades. His office was in a modest building in downtown Denver, and the walls were covered with framed newspaper articles about HOA disputes he'd won. "Your case is tricky," Kowalski said after I'd explained everything. "The HOA bylaws are vague enough that they could be interpreted multiple ways. That's actually pretty common. Most HOA bylaws are poorly written. Can we fight it? We can. But you need to understand what you're getting into. HOA litigation is expensive and time-consuming. We're looking at probably 12 to 18 months if it goes to trial, and legal fees in the range of $15,000 to $25,000. I felt sick. I don't have that kind of money. Most people don't. That's how HOAs win. They grind people down financially until they can't afford to keep fighting." He leaned back in his chair. "But there are some strategies we can use. First, we can try to negotiate. Sometimes HOAs will back down if they realize you're serious about fighting and have good legal representation. Patricia doesn't seem like the backing down type. Then we go to mediation, which is usually required before you can file a lawsuit anyway. If mediation fails, we can file suit arguing that the bylaws are unenforceable due to vagueness, that your business is a legally permitted home occupation under Colorado law, and that the HOA is acting in bad faith." "What are our chances?" Kowalski shrugged. 50-50, maybe 60-40 in your favor if we can prove bad faith. The problem is that HOAs have a lot of discretion in how they interpret and enforce their rules. Judges are usually reluctant to override HOA decisions unless there's clear evidence of discrimination or improper procedure. We talked for another 30 minutes about strategy and costs. Kowalski said he'd take the case for a $10,000 retainer, with additional fees billed hourly. I told him I needed to think about it, which was code for, "I have no idea how I'll pay for this." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a beer and my laptop, staring at my bank account balance. Morrison's $7,500 was still there, untouched except for the child support payment. I had about $3,000 in other savings. That was $8,500 total. I'd need $10,000 for Kowalski's retainer, which would wipe me out. And then what? How would I pay the ongoing fees? How would I pay my mortgage, my bills, everything else? My phone rang. Emma calling from her mom's house. "Hey, sweetheart. Dad, are you okay? Mom said you're having some kind of problem with the neighborhood. It's nothing for you to worry about, honey, just some grown-up stuff. Is it about your snowmobile shop? Because Tommy's dad said you fixed his sled and it runs better than new. You're really good at that. Thanks, Em. That means a lot. You're not going to have to stop doing it, are you? I like telling my friends my dad has his own business. That hit me right in the chest. Emma was 8, and she'd been through enough upheaval with the divorce. The last thing I wanted was for her to see me get beaten down by some petty HOA president. I'm going to do everything I can to keep working, okay? Don't worry about it. After we hung up, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Patricia Hendricks intimidate me into giving up. If I had to fight, I'd fight. Friday morning, I called Kowalski's office and told him I wanted to move forward. I'd find the money somehow. He said he'd draft a letter to the HOA demanding they cease their harassment and requesting mediation. That afternoon, I was working on a newer Polaris that had some electrical gremlins when 3 people I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. A middle-aged couple and a younger woman, all looking nervous. "Are you Kyle Anderson?" the man asked. "I am." "We're sorry to bother you. We're the Hutchinsons. We live 4 streets over. And this is our daughter, Melissa. We heard you're having trouble with the HOA. Word travels fast." "Patricia Hendricks came to our house last night," Mrs. Hutchinson said. "She told us we need to remove our daughter's car from our driveway because it's unsightly. It's a perfectly normal car, just 10 years old, and she's saving money for college so she can't afford a new one. She's threatening us with fines too," Mr. Hutchinson added. $500 if we don't get rid of the car within 2 weeks. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I'm not sure how I can help." "We want to fight back," Melissa said, "but we don't know how. We heard you're getting a lawyer." We stood in my driveway for a while, comparing notes about Patricia's harassment. It turned out I wasn't the only one she'd been targeting. The Hutchinsons told me about 3 other families who'd been hit with fines or threats in the past 2 months. An elderly couple who'd been ordered to repaint their house because the color was supposedly wrong, even though it had been that color for 15 years. A single mother who'd been fined for having her garbage cans visible from the street on a non-collection day. A family who'd been told their children's playhouse violated architectural standards. "She's on a power trip," Mr. Hutchinson said, "and she's targeting anyone she thinks won't fight back." "We should all fight together," I said. "There's strength in numbers." If we can show a pattern of harassment and arbitrary enforcement, that strengthens everyone's case. We exchanged contact information, and I promised to keep them updated on what my attorney said. After they left, I felt a strange sense of solidarity. I wasn't alone in this fight. Patricia had overreached, and she'd made enemies all over the neighborhood. That evening, I got a call from Frank. "Dude, did you organize some kind of rebellion? Patricia just came to my door asking if I'd been talking to you about HOA business." "What did you tell her?" "I told her we're neighbors and friends, and I'll talk to whoever I want about whatever I want. She didn't like that. She's going to come after you now, too. Let her try. I've been documenting everything since she became president. Every petty complaint, every threatening letter. I'm ready if she wants to start something." Over the weekend, I got calls and visits from 6 more families in the neighborhood. Patricia's reign of terror had affected way more people than I'd realized. Everyone had a story about unreasonable demands, arbitrary rule enforcement, or threats of fines and legal action. The common thread was that Patricia was targeting people she perceived as vulnerable. Single parents, elderly residents, anyone who seemed like they wouldn't have the resources to fight back. Sunday afternoon, I organized an informal meeting at my house. 14 people showed up, representing 10 different households. We sat in my living room and garage, sharing stories and trying to figure out what to do. "We need to vote her out," said Martha Chen, an elderly woman who'd been threatened with fines for having the wrong kind of flowers in her garden. "The next HOA election isn't until November," someone else pointed out. "That's 9 months away. We can call a special meeting and vote for her removal," I said. "The bylaws allow for that if enough homeowners petition for it. How many do we need?" I pulled up the bylaws on my laptop and read through the relevant section. 20% of homeowners have to sign a petition requesting a special meeting. We've got 240 houses in the community, so we need 48 signatures. "We can get that," Frank said. "Half the neighborhood hates her already." We divided up the community into sections and agreed to spend the next week gathering signatures. I drafted a petition stating that we were requesting a special meeting to vote on Patricia Hendricks' removal as HOA president due to abuse of power and harassment of residents. Monday morning, Gregory Kowalski called with news. I sent the letter to the HOA's attorney. I also included a notice that you're prepared to file a lawsuit for harassment and selective enforcement if they continue with their threats. What do you think they'll do? Could go either way. Some HOAs back down when they realize they're dealing with real legal representation. Others double down. We'll see. I spent the week gathering signatures during my free time. The response was overwhelming. People were practically throwing themselves at me to sign the petition. Stories came out about Patricia's behavior that were even worse than I'd heard before. She'd apparently made a woman cry by threatening to fine her over a Christmas decoration that stayed up 2 days past the approved deadline. She told an elderly man that his mobility scooter was an eyesore and needed to be kept inside at all times. By Friday, we had 72 signatures, way more than the 48 required. I submitted the petition to the HOA board, as required by the bylaws, and waited to see what would happen. I didn't have to wait long. Saturday morning, Patricia showed up at my house with 2 Jefferson County Sheriff's deputies in tow. My heart sank when I saw them pull up. Had she actually managed to convince the police to arrest me for fixing snowmobiles? I walked out to meet them. One of the deputies was Marcus, which was both reassuring and embarrassing. The other was an older guy with sergeant stripes. "Kyle," Marcus said, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Hendricks has filed a complaint alleging that you've been harassing her and threatening her." "What? That's insane." "She says you organized a campaign to have her removed from her position, and that you've been making threats about legal action," the sergeant said. Patricia stood behind the deputies with her arms crossed, looking smug. "I have witnesses who heard him threatening me. This man is unstable and dangerous. I organized a legal petition to call a special HOA meeting, which is my right under our community bylaws," I said, keeping my voice calm. "And my attorney sent a letter to the HOA's attorney. That's not harassment. That's how legal disputes work." "He's been turning the neighborhood against me," Patricia said, "creating a hostile environment. I don't feel safe in my own community." Marcus looked at Patricia with barely concealed skepticism. "Mrs. Hendricks, organizing a petition isn't illegal. And having an attorney send a letter definitely isn't illegal. If Mr. Anderson has made specific threats against you, we need to know exactly what was said and when. He said he was going to destroy me legally, that he'd make sure I paid for what I'd done." "I've never said anything like that to you," I said. "The only conversations we've had were when you came to my house to threaten me about my business." The sergeant looked between us with the tired expression of someone who dealt with too many petty neighbor disputes. "This sounds like a civil matter. Mrs. Hendricks, if you believe Mr. Anderson has defamed you or harassed you, you'll need to pursue that through civil court. But based on what you've told us, no crime has been committed. What about trespassing? He's had people coming to my door asking me questions, bothering me at home. Did Mr. Anderson personally come to your door? No, but he sent people. That's still not a crime, madam. People are allowed to knock on doors and talk to their neighbors. Patricia's face was turning red again. So you're not going to do anything, even though this man is clearly harassing me. We're documenting your complaint, the sergeant said, but there's no evidence of criminal activity. If you feel unsafe, you can pursue a restraining order through the courts. After the deputies left, with Marcus giving me an apologetic look, Patricia stood in my driveway glaring at me. "This isn't over," she said. "You're right," I said. "It's not. We have more than enough signatures for a special meeting. The board has to schedule it within 30 days. You think you can remove me? I am this HOA. I've done more for this community in 4 months than the previous president did in 10 years. You've terrorized people, fined them for no reason, made their lives miserable, and now everyone knows it. I enforce the rules. That's my job. No, you abuse your power because it makes you feel important. There's a difference." She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. "We're done here, Patricia. I have nothing more to say to you. Anything else goes through attorneys." I went back into my garage and shut the door. My hands were shaking from adrenaline. The confrontation had been ugly, but at least it was over. For now, Marcus called me that evening. "Hey man, sorry about that this morning. She insisted we come out and we have to respond to complaints. I know. I'm not mad at you. She's something else, though. The sergeant said she's called us out 4 times in the past month for various neighbor disputes. None of them were criminal matters. She's desperate. She knows she's about to lose her position. Just be careful. People like that sometimes escalate when they feel cornered." Marcus's warning proved prescient. Over the next 2 weeks, things got worse. Patricia filed a formal complaint with the police alleging I'd threatened her, which went nowhere but still required me to give a statement. She sent letters to every homeowner in the community claiming I was a dangerous criminal who was running an illegal chop shop. She filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau, which was resolved immediately when I provided my license and documentation. She even contacted my ex-wife and tried to convince her that I was an unfit parent because of my criminal enterprise. That last one really got to me. My ex, Sarah, called me furious. "What the hell is going on, Kyle? Some crazy woman called me saying you're under investigation for illegal business activities and that I should be concerned about Emma's safety. It's not true. None of it. She's the HOA president, and she's trying to shut down my repair shop. I'm not doing anything illegal. This is affecting our daughter now. If this woman is going to start involving Emma in your drama, you need to shut it down. I'm trying. You think I want this? Patricia is the one escalating everything." We argued for a while before Sarah finally calmed down enough to listen to the full story. She was still angry, but at least she was angry at Patricia instead of me. The special HOA meeting was scheduled for the 3rd Saturday in March. The meeting would be held at the community center, and all homeowners were invited to attend and vote on whether to remove Patricia from her position as president. In the meantime, I kept working on snowmobiles and trying to keep my business afloat. The HOA had escalated their fines to $1,500 per week, which I was ignoring because my attorney said they weren't legally enforceable while we were in dispute. But the stress was wearing on me. I wasn't sleeping well. I'd lost weight. I snapped at Emma one evening over something trivial and felt terrible about it for days. A week before the special meeting, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Mr. Anderson, this is Detective Sarah Reeves with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. I need to speak with you about a serious matter. Can you come down to the station?" My stomach dropped. "What's this about?" "I'd rather discuss it in person." "Can you come this afternoon?" I agreed and spent the next hour in a panic. What had Patricia done now? Had she actually managed to manufacture some kind of criminal charge against me? At the sheriff's station, Detective Reeves led me to an interview room. She was in her 40s, professional and no nonsense. "Mr. Anderson, I'm investigating a complaint filed by Patricia Hendricks. She alleges that you've been stalking her, that you've made threats, and that you've encouraged others to harass her." "That's all false. I haven't stalked anyone or made threats. She provided us with copies of text messages that she says are threatening. Let me show you." Reeves pulled out her tablet and showed me screenshots of text messages. They were supposedly from my phone number, saying things like, "You're going to regret crossing me, and I know where you live and I'm watching you." "I never sent these," I said. "Check my phone." "These messages aren't in my sent folder because I didn't send them. Phone records can be deleted. Not from the carrier's side. Pull the records from the phone company. These are fake." Reeves studied me for a long moment. "Why would she fake threatening messages?" "Because she's desperate. There's a vote scheduled to remove her as HOA president, and she's trying to discredit me before it happens. This is a setup." I pulled out my phone and showed her my actual text message history. No threatening messages, nothing even close. Reeves took notes and asked me a bunch more questions about my relationship with Patricia and the HOA dispute. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Anderson. This whole situation smells fishy. The text messages she showed us don't match the pattern of your other interactions. Everything else has been civil or gone through attorneys. These messages are aggressive and stupid, which doesn't match your profile. So you don't think I sent them? I think we need to investigate further before making any determinations. In the meantime, I want you to be very careful about any interactions with Mrs. Hendricks. Document everything. If she approaches you or contacts you, record it if possible. She's the one who should be investigated. She's been harassing half the neighborhood for months. That's a civil matter. But if she's falsifying evidence or filing false police reports, that becomes criminal. We'll look into it." I left the sheriff's station feeling like I was in the middle of a nightmare. Patricia had actually tried to frame me for making threats. If the detective hadn't been smart enough to question the evidence, I could have been arrested. I called Gregory Kowalski immediately and filled him in. "She's committed a crime," Kowalski said. "Filing a false police report is a misdemeanor, and if she fabricated evidence, that's even worse. You need to make sure the detective investigates thoroughly." She said she would. Good. This actually helps our case significantly. If we can prove Patricia has been acting in bad faith and even criminally, it undermines everything she's done as HOA president. Her decisions can be invalidated, and you'd have grounds for a lawsuit against her personally. The week before the meeting dragged by in agonizing slow motion. I kept working, kept taking care of Emma on my custody days, kept trying to maintain some semblance of normal life. But I felt like I was walking around with a target on my back, waiting for Patricia's next attack. It came 2 days before the special meeting. I was in the garage working on a customer's Arctic Cat when a black Cadillac Escalade pulled into my driveway. A man in an expensive suit got out, along with 2 other large men who looked like they belonged in a mob movie. The man in the suit walked up to my garage with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Kyle Anderson. That's me. Can I help you? My name is Vincent Palmery. I'm a friend of Patricia Hendricks. She's asked me to have a conversation with you. Everything about this felt wrong. I don't have anything to say to Patricia except through attorneys. That's unfortunate. You see, Patricia is very upset about this situation. The vote next week, all the drama you've created. She'd like this to go away. Then she should resign. Or you could withdraw the petition. Stop working against her. In exchange, she's willing to forget about the fines and let you continue your little business here. After she tried to frame me for making threats, after she's harassed half the neighborhood. No deal. Vincent's smile disappeared. You're making a mistake. Patricia has powerful friends, people who can make your life very difficult. The smart thing would be to take the deal and walk away. One of the large men behind Vincent cracked his knuckles. It was such a cliché move that it would have been funny if I wasn't genuinely scared. Are you threatening me? I'm having a conversation, explaining your options. Think carefully about what you want to do, Kyle. You've got a daughter, right? Emma, pretty little girl. You wouldn't want anything to affect her, would you? That was it. That crossed every line. Get the hell off my property now. We're leaving, but think about what I said. You have until tomorrow night to withdraw the petition. After they left, I immediately called 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I told the dispatcher that I'd just been threatened by men who'd mentioned my daughter by name. 2 deputies arrived within 15 minutes. I gave them a full statement and description of Vincent and his goons. They took it seriously, especially when I mentioned that Patricia had sent them and that there was already an ongoing investigation into her filing false police reports. We're going to have a conversation with Mrs. Hendricks, one of the deputies said. This sounds like witness intimidation, which is a felony. Marcus called me an hour later. Dude, what the hell? I heard about what happened. Are you okay? I'm rattled. They mentioned Emma by name, Marcus. That's a direct threat. We're taking this seriously. Detective Reeves is pulling Patricia in for questioning right now. Good. This has gone way too far. You should probably stay somewhere else tonight just to be safe, and keep Emma at her mom's until this is resolved. I took Marcus's advice and stayed at Frank's house that night. I called Sarah and explained what had happened, leaving out the part about Emma being mentioned by name because I didn't want to terrify her. We agreed that Emma would stay with her mother for the next week, just to be safe. The special HOA meeting took place on Saturday at 3 in the afternoon. The community center was packed with at least 150 people, maybe more. Nearly every seat was filled and people stood along the walls. I'd never seen this level of turnout for an HOA meeting before. Patricia sat at the board table at the front of the room, flanked by the other board members. She looked haggard and angry, but she was clearly planning to fight to the bitter end. The meeting was called to order by the vice president, a mild-mannered accountant named Ron who looked like he wished he was anywhere else. We're here to vote on a motion to remove Patricia Hendricks as HOA president, Ron said. Before we vote, both sides will have a chance to speak. Patricia, you'll go first. Patricia stood and launched into a 20-minute speech about everything she'd accomplished as president. New landscaping contracts, updated community standards, enforced rules that had been ignored for years. She painted herself as a dedicated volunteer who was being attacked by troublemakers who didn't want to follow the rules. Kyle Anderson has been operating an illegal business in clear violation of our bylaws, she said. When I tried to enforce the rules, he organized a campaign to remove me. He's gathered signatures by spreading lies about me and turning neighbor against neighbor. This vote is being driven by personal animosity, not by any legitimate concern about my leadership. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and looked around the room at all the faces. Neighbors I'd lived near for 4 years. People I'd waved to at the mailbox, chatted with at the park, helped with minor repairs over the years. I'm not going to spend a lot of time defending myself, I said. Most of you know me. You know I'm not some troublemaker or criminal. I fix snowmobiles. That's it. I'm a trained mechanic. I have all the proper licenses and insurance, and I work out of my garage during reasonable hours. Patricia decided that was a problem, and she's been threatening me with fines and legal action for the past 2 months. I paused and looked directly at Patricia. But this isn't really about me. It's about how Patricia has treated everyone in this community. How many of you have been threatened with fines in the past 4 months? About 30 hands went up around the room. How many have been harassed or contacted multiple times about minor issues? More hands. Patricia doesn't enforce rules fairly or reasonably. She uses her position to bully people, and when we tried to address that through the proper legal channels, she escalated. She filed false police reports claiming I'd threatened her. She sent men to my house to intimidate me. They mentioned my 8-year-old daughter by name. There was an audible gasp from several people in the room. Patricia's face went pale. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office is currently investigating Patricia for filing false reports and witness intimidation. Both of those are crimes. And that's why I'm asking you to vote to remove her today. This community deserves better leadership than someone who breaks the law to get their way. The room erupted in conversation. Ron had to bang a gavel to restore order. Several other people stood to speak, sharing their own experiences with Patricia's harassment. The vice president of the HOA board, a woman named Michelle, revealed that Patricia had been making decisions without consulting the rest of the board and had been misrepresenting board votes to homeowners. When it finally came time to vote, it wasn't even close. 147 homeowners voted to remove Patricia as president. 12 voted against. Patricia sat at the table with her face frozen in shock and fury as the results were announced. "The motion passes," Ron said. Patricia Hendricks is removed as HOA president effective immediately. The board will meet next week to elect a new president. Patricia stood slowly, gathering her papers. "This community is going to fall apart without me. You'll all see. When the property values drop and everything becomes chaotic, remember that you did this." She walked out to scattered applause and a few boos. I felt a wave of relief so intense that my knees went weak. It was over. Finally over. After the meeting, dozens of people came up to thank me and shake my hand. The elderly woman whose flowers had been criticized gave me a hug. The single mother who'd been fined for her garbage cans had tears in her eyes. "You did it," Frank said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You actually took down the dragon. We did it. This was all of us." Marcus found me in the parking lot afterward. "Just wanted to let you know, Patricia's been charged with filing a false police report. We're still investigating the witness intimidation, but we identified the guy who came to your house. Vincent Palmery. He's got a record, and Patricia hired him through some shady debt collection agency. So, what happens now?" "She's looking at misdemeanor charges at minimum, possibly felony if we can prove the witness intimidation. Either way, she's done terrorizing you and everyone else." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The next morning, I called Gregory Kowalski and told him about the vote. "Congratulations," he said. "This significantly changes your legal position. With Patricia removed and facing criminal charges, I think the HOA will drop all their complaints and fines against you. What if they don't? Then we proceed with the lawsuit, but I'd be shocked if it came to that. The new board isn't going to want to continue Patricia's vendetta." Kowalski was right. 3 days later, I received a letter from the HOA board stating that all fines against me were being withdrawn, and that my home-based business was approved as long as I maintained the professional standards I'd already demonstrated. The letter was signed by Ron, the new HOA president, and included an apology for the harassment I'd endured. Officer Morrison called me a few days after that. "Hey man, just wanted to check in and see how everything turned out. I heard through the grapevine that your HOA president got removed." "Yeah, and charged with filing false police reports." "Good, she had it coming. How's business getting back to normal?" "I've actually got more customers now than before all this started. Apparently, word got around about what happened and people want to support me." "That's awesome." "Hey, I've got a buddy who needs some work done on his sled. Mind if I send him your way?" "Absolutely. Always happy to help." Business did pick up significantly over the next few weeks. I got calls from all over the Denver metro area. People who'd heard about the HOA fight and wanted to support a small business owner who'd stood up to bureaucratic bullying. I had to start scheduling repairs 3 weeks out because I was so busy. Emma came back to stay with me the following weekend. She wanted to hear all about what had happened with the mean HOA lady. "Is she gone now?" Emma asked. "Yeah, sweetheart, she's gone. Everything's back to normal." "Good, I like your shop. It smells like motors and metal." "That's an odd thing to like. It smells like you, like home." That hit me right in the heart. This wasn't just about making a living. It was about building something for my daughter, showing her that you stand up for yourself when someone tries to push you around, and that hard work and integrity matter. 2 months later, Patricia pleaded guilty to filing a false police report and was sentenced to a year of probation and a $500 fine. The witness intimidation charges were dropped because prosecutors couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she'd explicitly directed Vincent Palmery to threaten me. But everyone knew the truth. Patricia moved out of the neighborhood in May. I heard through the grapevine that she'd taken a job in Grand Junction and was relocating across the state. I couldn't say I was sad to see her go. The new HOA board under Ron's leadership was like night and day compared to Patricia's regime. They focused on actual community improvement projects instead of petty rule enforcement. They organized neighborhood events, negotiated better rates with service contractors, and generally made the community a better place to live. My snow machine repair business continued to grow. By the time summer rolled around and snowmobile season ended, I'd saved enough money to start thinking about expanding. I'd been getting requests to do other small engine work, lawn equipment, boat motors, that kind of thing. It would mean investing in some new tools and equipment, but I finally had the financial cushion to consider it. One evening in early June, I was cleaning the garage when Frank came over with beers. "You know, you've become kind of a legend in the neighborhood," Frank said. "That's ridiculous." "I'm serious. You're the guy who took down the evil HOA president. People respect that. I just wanted to fix snowmobiles in peace." "Yeah, but you ended up doing way more than that. You showed everyone that you don't have to just accept it when someone abuses their power. You can fight back and win." We sat in my driveway as the sun set, drinking beer and watching the neighborhood kids play in the street. It was peaceful, normal, everything I'd been fighting for. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Reeves. "Wanted to let you know Patricia's probation started today." Also, we traced those fake text messages back to her personal computer. She created them using Photoshop. "Just thought you'd want to know we got the full story." I showed the text to Frank. "Wow, she really went all out trying to destroy you." "Yeah, and it didn't work." The summer passed quickly. Emma spent more time with me, and we took trips up to the mountains to go hiking and fishing. I worked on small engines during the week and spent weekends with my daughter. It was a good life. A simple life, When fall rolled around and snowmobile season started gearing up again, I was ready. I'd expanded my workshop, added new equipment, and even hired a part-time assistant to help with the workload. Business was booming. Officer Morrison stopped by in late October to drop off his Arctic cat for a tune-up before the season. "You know, I tell everyone I meet about that day I came to your house on a call and ended up buying a sled from you," Morrison said. "It's a great story. It's definitely not how I expected that interaction to go. Best purchase I made all year. That machine runs like a dream." We chatted while I gave his snowmobile a once-over, checking the belt, the suspension, the track. Everything looked good. Just needed a basic tune-up and fluid change. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd given up?" Morrison asked. "If you just shut down the business when that HOA lady demanded it?" "Sometimes. I think I would have regretted it forever. Not just because of the money, but because of what it would have taught my daughter. That bullies win if you let them." "My wife says the same thing. She's a teacher, and she's always talking about how important it is to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." "Your wife's a smart woman." Morrison left with his freshly tuned snowmobile, and I went back to work on the half-dozen other machines in my garage. It was a good problem to have, being too busy. That evening, I picked up Emma from school and took her out for pizza. She was chattering about her day, some drama with friends, and a science project she was excited about. "Dad, can I tell people you're a mechanic?" she asked over pepperoni slices. "You can tell people whatever you want, sweetheart." "Why?" "Because we're doing career day next month, and I want to tell everyone about your shop, about how you fix things and help people." "I'd be honored. And maybe about how you fought the mean lady and won. Maybe keep that part simple. Just say I had some problems with the neighborhood rules, but we worked it out." Emma nodded seriously, like I'd shared some profound wisdom. We finished our pizza and headed home, and I tucked her into bed that night feeling grateful for everything I had. A home, a business, a daughter who was proud of me. It had been a hell of a fight to keep it all, but it was worth it. The neighborhood had changed too. People were friendlier, more willing to help each other out. Several times over the next few months, neighbors would stop by just to chat or ask advice about their own projects. Frank started organizing monthly barbecues where half the street would get together. The community felt like a community again, instead of a collection of people living in fear of HOA violations. Ron, the new HOA president, stopped by one Saturday morning while I was working. "Just wanted to check in and make sure everything's going smoothly," Ron said. "Any problems with the board or anything?" "None at all. Everything's been great." "Good. You know, your situation was kind of a wake-up call for all of us. Made us realize the HOA had gotten way off track from what it was supposed to be about. We've rewritten a bunch of the bylaws to make them clearer and less open to abuse." "That's good to hear." "And we voted to establish a formal appeals process, so if someone disagrees with a board decision, they have options besides just hiring a lawyer and going to court." "Should have had that from the beginning." We talked for a while about the changes the board was making, and I was impressed by how thoughtful they were being. The new bylaws still maintained community standards, but they also protected homeowners from arbitrary enforcement and gave people clear rights. Winter came hard and fast that year, with heavy snow starting in early November. My shop was completely swamped with repair work. I was turning away customers because I simply didn't have time to take on more work. The part-time assistant I'd hired turned into a full-time employee, and I was seriously considering hiring a second person. One afternoon in December, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Kyle Anderson, the snowmobile mechanic?" "That's me." "This is Tom Wheeler. I own a dealership in Boulder. I've been hearing about your work from a bunch of my customers. They say you're the best independent mechanic in the metro area. That's kind of them to say. I'm expanding my service department, and I'm looking for a senior technician. Someone who can handle the complicated rebuilds and supervise other mechanics. Would you be interested in talking about it? It was a good offer. Probably better pay than I was making on my own, with benefits and stability. A year ago, I would have jumped at it. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Wheeler, but I'm happy working for myself. Took me a long time to build this business, and I'm not ready to give it up. What if I told you we could work out a contract arrangement? You stay independent, but we send overflow work your way and put you on our referral list. You'd get more business than you could handle. That was interesting. We talked for a while about what that might look like, and by the end of the call, we'd agreed to meet the following week to discuss details. The partnership with Wheeler's dealership ended up being perfect. They sent me work. I sent them work when I was too busy, and both of us benefited. My income doubled over the next few months, and I was finally able to build up a real savings cushion. Emma's career day presentation in January was adorable. She brought photos of my workshop and talked about how I fixed snowmobiles and helped people get back on the mountain. She mentioned that I'd had some problems with neighborhood rules but had worked it out, just like I'd told her. Her teacher sent me a note saying Emma's presentation was one of the best in the class and that I should be very proud. I was proud, not just of Emma, but of everything we'd built. The business, the life, the community. It hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I'd wanted to give up. But standing your ground against someone like Patricia Hendricks, refusing to be bullied or intimidated, that was important. Not just for me, but for everyone in the neighborhood who'd been affected by her abuse of power. Spring came again, bringing an end to snowmobile season and the start of boat and lawn equipment repair season. The business kept growing. I hired a second full-time employee and started looking into renting a small commercial space to expand out of the garage. Not because the HOA was complaining, but because I'd genuinely outgrown the space. One evening in April, I was closing up the garage when an unfamiliar car pulled into my driveway. A woman got out, maybe in her early 30s, professionally dressed. Kyle Anderson. That's me. My name is Rebecca Torres. I'm a reporter with the Denver Post. I'm working on a story about HOA abuses and disputes in Colorado, and your name came up multiple times when I was doing research. Would you be willing to talk to me about what happened with your HOA? I'd never thought about my story being newsworthy, but as Rebecca explained her angle, it made sense. HOA disputes were a huge problem across the state, and a lot of people felt powerless against them. My story of fighting back and winning was exactly the kind of thing that might help other people in similar situations. We did the interview in my living room, and I walked her through everything that had happened. Patricia's initial threats, the escalating harassment, the false police reports, the vote to remove her. Rebecca took detailed notes and asked smart questions. What advice would you give someone else dealing with HOA abuse? Rebecca asked. Document everything. Get copies of all the bylaws and rules. Know your rights under state law. Don't be afraid to get legal help if you need it, and talk to your neighbors. You're probably not the only one being targeted. What about people who can't afford lawyers? There are legal aid services, and some attorneys will work on contingency or do consultations for free. Even just having an attorney send one letter can sometimes be enough to make an HOA back down. They bank on people being too scared or too broke to fight back. The article ran 2 weeks later on the front page of the Metro section. Standing up to HOA abuse, one man's fight against neighborhood tyranny. It was a good piece, fair and thorough, and it included comments from several of my neighbors about their own experiences with Patricia. The response was overwhelming. I got emails and calls from dozens of people across the state dealing with similar situations. Some wanted advice, some just wanted to share their stories. I couldn't help everyone, but I put together a document with resources and information and shared it with anyone who asked. Gregory Kowalski, my attorney, called after the article came out. "You're famous now. That was a great piece." I didn't expect it to get that much attention. HOA disputes are a hot topic. People are angry about how much power these organizations have and how little recourse homeowners have when things go wrong. Your story gives people hope that they can fight back. I'm not trying to be some kind of crusader. I just wanted to fix snowmobiles. Sometimes being a regular person standing up for your rights is the most powerful thing you can do. Over the following months, I watched as other neighborhoods in the Denver area started pushing back against abusive HOA boards. Several news stories featured homeowners who'd been inspired by my case to organize their own special meetings and vote out problematic board members. A state legislator even introduced a bill to strengthen homeowner protections and create better oversight of HOA boards. My business continued to thrive. By the time summer rolled around again, I'd moved into a small commercial space about 2 miles from my house. I kept the garage at home for personal projects and storage, but most of the work now happened at the shop. I had 3 full-time employees and was doing repair work on everything from snowmobiles to ATVs to personal watercraft. Emma, now 9, loved coming to the shop after school. She'd sit at a workbench doing homework while I worked on machines, asking questions about how engines worked and why things broke. She was developing a real interest in mechanics, which made me proud. One evening in late summer, I was at the shop finishing up some paperwork when Patricia Hendricks walked in. I hadn't seen her since she'd moved out of the neighborhood over a year ago, and the sight of her made my stomach clench with old tension. "Kyle," she said. Her voice was different, quieter, less aggressive. "Patricia, what are you doing here?" I wanted to apologize for everything that happened. I stared at her, not sure if I'd heard correctly. "You're apologizing?" "I know it doesn't change anything, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I wanted you to know that I realize I was wrong. I let the power go to my head, and I hurt a lot of people, including you. Why now? Why bother apologizing a year later? Therapy. Court-ordered because of the probation. My therapist has been working with me on taking responsibility for my actions and making amends where possible." We stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Part of me wanted to tell her to get out, that her apology meant nothing after everything she'd put me through. But another part recognized that it took courage to come here and face me. "I appreciate the apology," I finally said. "I hope you've learned something from all this." "I have. I was in a bad place mentally, and I took it out on everyone around me. That's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. I'm working on being a better person. Good luck with that." Patricia left, and I sat in my empty shop processing the conversation. An apology didn't undo the months of stress and fear and financial pressure she'd caused. But it was something. A recognition that what she'd done was wrong. I called Frank that evening and told him about Patricia's visit. "Wow, did not see that coming. Think she meant it. I don't know, maybe. People can change, I guess. Still, after everything she put you through, just showing up like that took some nerve. Or it was part of her probation requirements. Either way, it's done. I don't have to think about Patricia Hendricks anymore." And I didn't. Life moved on. The business kept growing. Emma kept getting older and smarter and more interested in mechanics. My relationship with my ex-wife improved as we figured out better co-parenting strategies. The neighborhood continued to thrive under the new HOA leadership. 2 years after the whole mess started, I attended an HOA meeting for the first time since the special vote. Ron was still president, and the board was discussing a proposal to renovate the community center. We wanted to get input from homeowners before making a final decision, Ron said. This is your community, and major decisions should involve everyone. It was such a stark contrast to how Patricia had run things. Transparency, input, respect for homeowners' opinions. This was how an HOA was supposed to work. After the meeting, several people came up to talk to me. The elderly couple whose house color had been questioned. The single mother who'd been fined. The family with the playhouse. All of them were thriving, no longer living in fear of arbitrary fines and harassment. You changed this neighborhood, Martha Chen told me. Before you stood up to Patricia, the rest of us were too scared. You showed us we could fight back. I didn't do it alone. All of you signed that petition. You all voted. But you started it. You were the first one brave enough to say no. Driving home that night, I thought about everything that had happened, the fear and stress of those first few months. The escalation and the threats. The vote and Patricia's removal. The criminal charges and the vindication. And now, 2 years later, a healthy community and a thriving business. It had all started with me just wanting to fix snowmobiles in my garage. Such a simple thing. But defending that simple thing had required standing up to intimidation, refusing to back down, and trusting that the system would work if you pushed it hard enough. Officer Morrison had come to my house on a complaint that day, fully prepared to tell me to shut everything down if necessary. Instead, he'd bought a snowmobile from me and become one of my best customers. That moment had been the turning point, proof that not everyone saw me as the bad guy Patricia was trying to paint me as. Emma graduated elementary school that spring with honors. At the ceremony, they asked kids what they wanted to be when they grew up. Emma said she wanted to be a mechanical engineer because her dad had taught her that you could fix anything if you understood how it worked. My ex-wife caught me tearing up during that part of the ceremony. You should be proud, Sarah said. You've been a good father to her. I just fixed snowmobiles. You did a lot more than that. You showed her what it means to stand up for yourself and fight for what's right. That's worth more than any amount of money. The business hit its 5-year anniversary that summer. I threw a big party at the shop, inviting customers, neighbors, friends, and family. Marcus came, bringing half the sheriff's department with him. Officer Morrison showed up with his wife and kids. Frank organized the catering. Even Gregory Kowalski stopped by to congratulate me. You know, in 30 years of practicing law, your case was one of the most satisfying, Kowalski told me over a beer. We didn't even end up going to trial, but you still got justice. That's rare. Couldn't have done it without you. You did most of it yourself. I just wrote some scary letters. Standing in my shop surrounded by people I cared about, looking at the successful business I'd built from nothing, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The fight with Patricia and the HOA could have destroyed me. It could have cost me my home, my business, my relationship with my daughter. Instead, it had made me stronger and brought the community together. Emma ran up to me holding a cupcake, frosting all over her face. Dad, Mr. Morrison said you should teach a class on snowmobile repair. Can you do that? I want to take it. I'll think about it, sweetheart. You should. You're really good at fixing things and at standing up to mean people. I laughed and wiped frosting off her nose. Where'd you hear that? Everyone says it. They say you're the guy who beat the HOA. That's pretty cool. It was necessary, not cool. Can it be both? Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. The party went late into the evening, and by the time everyone left, I was exhausted but happy. Frank helped me clean up, and we stood outside the shop looking at the mountains in the distance. "You ever think about how different things could have gone?" Frank asked. "All the time. If I'd given up when Patricia first threatened me, if I'd shut down the business, if I hadn't fought back. But you did fight back, and you won. We won. The whole neighborhood won." Frank raised his beer can in a toast. To winning, and to not letting the bastards grind you down. We clinked cans and drank, and I thought about those early days when everything seemed impossible, when Patricia had seemed invincible and my little snowmobile repair business had seemed doomed. It was amazing how much could change in a few years with enough determination and the right support system. The Colorado winter came again, bringing fresh snow and a new rush of repair work. I'd finally reached the point where I could turn away jobs without worrying about making the mortgage payment. The business was stable, profitable, and growing at a sustainable pace. One December afternoon, a young guy came into the shop with a beat-up old Polaris on a trailer. "Are you Kyle Anderson?" he asked. "That's me. I heard you're the guy who stood up to an HOA and won, that you fought back when they tried to shut you down." "That's true. What can I do for you? I'm going through the same thing right now." Different neighborhood, different HOA, but same basic situation. They're trying to find me for working on cars in my driveway. I'm a mechanic like you, and I fix cars for extra money on weekends. "Have you talked to a lawyer?" "Can't afford one. I was hoping you might have some advice." I spent the next hour walking him through everything I'd learned. The importance of documentation, knowing your rights under state law, talking to neighbors, organizing resistance if necessary. I gave him Gregory Kowalski's contact information and told him to mention my name for a free consultation. "Don't let them intimidate you," I said. "That's what they're counting on. They think if they threaten you enough, you'll give up. Stand your ground, know the law, and don't back down." He left with hope in his eyes and a broken snowmobile to repair. I wondered if he'd follow through or if the fight would prove too much. Not everyone had the stomach for it, but maybe that was okay. Maybe the important thing was just knowing you could fight back if you wanted to. That these organizations weren't all powerful, that regular people had rights and options. Emma turned 10 that year, and for her birthday, she asked if she could help me rebuild a snowmobile from scratch. We found a salvage Arctic Cat similar to the one Morrison had bought, and we spent the next 3 months working on it together on weekends. I taught her about engines and suspension and electrical systems, and she soaked it all up like a sponge. When we finally got it running, the look of pure joy on her face was worth more than any amount of money. We took it up to the mountains for a test run, and she drove it herself for the first time, carefully at first and then with growing confidence. "Dad, this is the best thing ever," she said, her face glowing with excitement. "You did most of the work. You should be proud. We did it together." And that was the truth. Everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for, it was all about creating a life where Emma could grow up seeing that hard work mattered, that standing up for yourself mattered, that you didn't have to accept injustice just because someone with a title told you to. The business hit 7 years that next summer, and I finally achieved something I'd been working toward since the beginning: financial stability. Not rich, but comfortable, able to handle unexpected expenses without panic, able to save for Emma's college, able to take a vacation without worrying about missing work. Ron, the HOA president, stopped by the shop one afternoon with news. "Thought you'd want to know, the state legislature passed that HOA reform bill, the one that was partly inspired by your case." "Really? What does it do?" "Creates better oversight, requires clearer bylaws, gives homeowners more rights to appeal decisions. It won't prevent every bad HOA president, but it should make situations like what happened with Patricia less common." That's good. Really good. You made a difference, Kyle. Not just in our neighborhood, but across the whole state. That's something to be proud of. After Ron left, I sat in my office thinking about that conversation. I'd never set out to make a difference or change laws or become some kind of advocate. I just wanted to fix snowmobiles in peace. But sometimes standing up for something small leads to bigger changes you never expected. Marcus called that evening with an update I hadn't been expecting. Remember Vincent Pomeroy, the guy Patricia sent to threaten you? Hard to forget. He got arrested last week. Turns out he was running some kind of extortion racket, using his debt collection business as a front. When the police searched his records, they found documentation of the job Patricia hired him for. She's being charged as an accessory. You're kidding. Nope. The DA is moving forward with felony charges. She could be looking at real prison time. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Patricia had brought it all on herself through her own choices, but it was still tragic to see someone's life fall apart like that. Does she have a lawyer? Some public defender. She apparently lost her job in Grand Junction when news of the arrest came out. Whole thing's a mess. After hanging up, I told Emma about it at dinner. She was old enough now to understand the basics of what had happened all those years ago. You feel bad for her? Emma asked. A little. She made terrible choices and now she's paying for them. But yeah, I feel bad. It didn't have to go this way. You tried to work it out with her, though. She's the one who kept making it worse. That's true. Sometimes people make their own problems. The trial happened that fall. I had to testify about the day Vincent came to my house and made threats. It was surreal sitting in a courtroom explaining to a jury how my HOA dispute had escalated to the point where the president was hiring muscle to intimidate me. Patricia looked small and defeated at the defense table. Gone was the aggressive, imperious woman who'd stood in my driveway demanding I shut down my business. She'd been replaced by someone broken and tired. The jury found her guilty on multiple counts. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison, with credit for time served. As they led her away, Patricia looked back at me one time, and I saw something in her eyes that might have been regret or might have been resentment. I'd never know which. Life moved on. The business grew. Emma kept getting older and smarter. The neighborhood thrived under competent HOA leadership. I took on bigger projects and started teaching occasional classes on small engine repair at the local community college. 10 years after that first confrontation with Patricia, I was invited to speak at a state HOA conference about homeowner rights and reasonable rule enforcement. Standing at the podium looking out at hundreds of HOA board members from across Colorado, I felt the weight of everything that had happened. I'm not here to tell you that HOAs are bad, I said. Good HOAs serve an important purpose in maintaining communities and property values. But power needs to be balanced with responsibility and respect. Homeowners aren't your subjects. They're your neighbors and they have rights. I talked about the importance of clear rules, fair enforcement, and listening to community concerns. I talked about what happens when board members let power go to their heads and start treating their position as a license to control other people's lives. The HOA president who tried to shut down my business thought she was protecting the community, I said. But what she was really doing was abusing her power and hurting people. Don't be that person. Be the board member who listens, who treats people with respect, who remembers that you're serving the community, not ruling it. The speech got a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of board members came up to talk to me, thank me, and ask questions about how to be better leaders. It was gratifying to see that not all HOA board members were like Patricia. Most of them genuinely wanted to do the right thing and make their communities better. Emma graduated high school with a scholarship to Colorado School of Mines for mechanical engineering. At her graduation party, she gave a speech thanking her family and friends, and she specifically mentioned the snowmobile business. "My dad taught me that you can build something from nothing if you're willing to work hard and stand up for what you believe in," Emma said. "When people tried to take away what he'd built, he didn't give up. He fought back and he won. That's the kind of person I want to be." I was crying by the time she finished. Sarah, my ex-wife, reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did good, Kyle," she said. "Really good." The business hit its 15th anniversary the year Emma finished college. She came back to Colorado with her engineering degree and a job offer from a major aerospace company in Denver. But before starting her career, she asked if she could work at my shop for a few months. "I want to remember where I came from," she said. "And I want to learn more about the business side of things. You never know when that might be useful." Having Emma work beside me in the shop was one of the best experiences of my life. She was skilled and knowledgeable, and she brought fresh ideas about efficiency and organization. We worked together rebuilding engines and fixing machines, and I treasured every moment. "You ever regret it?" Emma asked one day while we were working on a particularly complicated ski-doo rebuild. The fight with the HOA, all the stress and problems it caused. "No," I said without hesitation. "It was hard, but it was worth it. Not just because I got to keep the business, but because of what it taught me about myself. That I could stand up to intimidation, that I could fight back and win, that I didn't have to accept injustice just because someone in authority said so. You taught me that too. All my life, watching you work and fight for this place, you showed me what it means to have integrity. That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me." Emma eventually left to start her aerospace career, but she still came by the shop on weekends to help out and work on projects. The business had become a family legacy, something that connected us across generations. 20 years after that first confrontation with Patricia Hendricks, I attended an HOA conference where they presented me with an award for my advocacy work and the impact my case had on Colorado HOA law. Standing on that stage accepting the plaque, I thought about how strange life was. All I'd wanted was to fix snowmobiles. Instead, I'd ended up changing laws and helping hundreds of other homeowners stand up to HOA abuse. "This award isn't really for me," I said in my acceptance speech. "It's for everyone who's ever felt powerless against bureaucratic abuse. Everyone who's been threatened or intimidated or fined for ridiculous reasons. You have rights. You have power. Don't be afraid to use it." The audience stood and applauded, and I saw faces in the crowd that I recognized. People I'd helped over the years, homeowners who'd reached out after reading about my case or attending my speeches. A whole network of people who'd been inspired to stand up for themselves because I'd stood up first. That evening, back at my shop, I sat alone looking at the award and thinking about everything that had happened. The fear and stress of those early days, the escalation and the threats, the vote and Patricia's removal, the criminal charges and the vindication, the years of advocacy work and helping others, and now, recognition for something I'd never planned to do. Officer Morrison's visit that day had been the turning point. If he'd shut me down, if he'd sided with Patricia, everything could have gone differently. But instead, he'd looked at my work, recognized its quality, and bought a snowmobile from me on the spot. That moment of validation from a law enforcement officer had given me the confidence to keep fighting. I picked up my phone and called Morrison, who I'd stayed in touch with over the years. "Hey Kyle, what's up? Remember that day you responded to the HOA complaint about my shop? 20 years ago, of course. I still have that Arctic cat. Runs like a dream. I just got an award for HOA advocacy work, and I realized that day was the turning point. If you'd handled it differently, I might have given up. You wouldn't have given up. You're not the giving up type. Maybe, but your support mattered. You treating me like a legitimate businessperson instead of a criminal, that made all the difference. I just saw good work and wanted to buy a snowmobile, but I'm glad it helped. We talked for a while about the past 20 years, the changes in the neighborhood, the reforms in HOA law, all of it. When we hung up, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for everyone who'd supported me along the way. Marcus, Frank, Gregory Kowalski, my neighbors, my customers, Emma, all of them had played a part in the story. The snowmobile repair shop that had started in my garage had grown into something bigger than I'd ever imagined. Not just a business, but a symbol of standing up for yourself and refusing to be bullied. That was worth more than any amount of money or recognition. I locked up the shop and drove home through the familiar streets of Lakewood, past houses where people lived their quiet suburban lives, mostly unaware of the small dramas and victories that happened behind closed doors. My house looked the same as it had 20 years ago, though I'd paid off the mortgage years earlier. The HOA was still there, still maintaining the neighborhood, but now it was run by reasonable people who understood that their job was to serve, not to control. Emma called as I was making dinner. "Hey, Dad, just wanted to tell you I saw the news about your award. Congratulations." "Thanks, sweetheart. It's a little surreal. You deserve it. You changed a lot of lives, you know. I just fixed snowmobiles. You did way more than that, and you know it." After we hung up, I sat on my back porch with a beer, looking at the mountains in the distance and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. A simple desire to fix snowmobiles had turned into a years-long fight against HOA abuse, which had turned into advocacy work and law changes, and helping hundreds of people stand up for their rights. All because Patricia Hendricks had decided my business was a problem and had tried to shut me down. All because I'd refused to give up. All because Officer Morrison had responded to a complaint and bought a snowmobile from me instead of citing me for violations. Life was strange and unpredictable, full of moments that seemed small at the time but turned out to change everything. That day in my garage 20 years ago, with Patricia standing in my driveway demanding I cease operations, had been one of those moments. I could have caved to the pressure, could have shut everything down to avoid the fight. But I'd stood my ground, and that simple decision had changed not just my life, but the lives of countless others. The stars were coming out now, bright against the Colorado sky. Tomorrow there would be more snowmobiles to fix, more customers to help, more work to do. But tonight, I could sit here and appreciate how far I'd come and how much had changed since that first confrontation. Somewhere out there, Patricia Hendricks was living her life, hopefully having learned something from her mistakes. I didn't know where she was or what she was doing, and I didn't really care. She was part of my past, a chapter that had closed long ago. What mattered now was the present and the future. The business I'd built, the daughter I'd raised, the community I'd helped protect, the laws I'd helped change. That was the legacy of standing up to HOA abuse and refusing to back down. I finished my beer and went inside, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The fight had been worth it. Every moment of stress and fear and uncertainty had been worth it for the life I had now. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing.